Hey everyone, welcome back. It's time for another deep dive. And this one, well, it's about something I think we all care about deeply.
Oh, definitely. The human side of healthcare.
You got it. You sent over a ton of fascinating stuff, articles, research, even some personal reflections on what it means to really care for another person. And honestly, it's had me thinking a lot.
Well, that's what we're here for, right? To get those brain juices flowing.
Exactly. And speaking of brain juices, you highlighted some amazing pieces by Fabio Robles.
Ah, yes. A Brazilian physician. Quite the philosopher, I'd say.
He really is. And we also have this thought-provoking YouTube video by Gabriel de Almeida talking about the challenges of being a dentist.
Where the focus can get so narrow. It's
Yep.
all about the teeth, the teeth, the teeth.
Right. And it's easy to forget there's a whole person attached to those teeth.
Exactly.
And then to top it all off, we have your own reflections on navigating healthcare from both sides, as a provider and as a patient.
Well, I've got to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Right. Absolutely. So we've got a pretty rich tapestry of perspectives here. So let's start weaving, shall we?
Yeah.
Robles, this Fabio Robles guy.
Yeah.
He really got me thinking with this idea of the ideal caregiver-patient relationship being like a dance.
Ah, yes. The
Yeah.
dance. What jumps out at you about that?
Well, I don't know. It just feels so different from the way we usually think about healthcare. Like it's not this one-way street of the doctor giving orders and the patient just following them.
It's more of a partnership.
Yeah.
Mm.
And there's this sense of movement of flow.
Exactly. And Robles also talks about how pain can actually be a bridge to connection, which is kind of a radical idea.
It is. When you think about it, we usually try to avoid pain at all costs.
Right. We want to numb it, push it away.
But Robles is suggesting that maybe pain can actually bring us closer together.
It's definitely something to ponder. Have you ever felt that in your own life? Like a shared experience of pain creating a bond?
I think I have, now that you mention it. There's this one time when I was in the hospital after I had surgery.
Huh.
Yeah. It wasn't anything major, but I was still pretty freaked out. And the nurse who was taking care of me, she could tell I was scared. And she just sat with me for a few minutes and held my hand.
Ah.
And we didn't really talk much. But it meant the world to me just to have someone there who understood what I was going through.
It's those little moments of human connection that can make all the difference.
They really can. And I think that's what Robles is getting at with this dance metaphor. It's about two people moving together through this difficult experience.
With both partners leading and following at different times.
Exactly. And there's this sense of trust and vulnerability that's so essential.
Absolutely. And Robles warns against the hero complex that can creep in for caregivers.
Oh, yeah. The whole I'm going to swoop in and save the day thing.
Exactly. And that can actually create distance in the relationship.
Because it puts the caregiver on a pedestal.
Yeah. And it makes the patient feel like they're not capable of contributing to their own healing.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap? What's a
Yeah.
better mindset to have?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing the inherent power imbalance in healthcare.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The doctor's the one with the knowledge, the authority, the prescription pad.
Right. And Robles even uses this term biopolitics to describe how societal structures influence our understanding of health and illness and the body itself.
Biopolitics. Huh. That sounds pretty intense.
It is. It's like even before you step into a doctor's office, there's this pre-existing power dynamic at play.
So it's not just about individual caregivers being nice.
Right. It's about recognizing these larger forces that shape the caregiver-patient relationship.
And how do we do that? How do we become aware of these power dynamics?
Well, for me, it's about constantly questioning my own assumptions, my own biases, and it's about being willing to listen to the patient's story without judgment or interruption.
Just really hear what they're saying.
Exactly, and to acknowledge their expertise on their own bodies and their own experiences.
That's so important and so often overlooked.
It is. We tend to think of the doctor as the expert, but the patient is the expert on their own life.
Okay, so we've got this dance of care, this power dynamic, this need for deep listening. What else is Robles talking about?
Well, he also talks about the dangers of a checklist mentality in healthcare.
Oh, gosh. Yes, I've definitely been on the receiving end of that.
We probably all have at some point, you
Right.
know? It's like you go to the doctor with a list of concerns and they just go down a list checking things off without really engaging with you as a person.
It can be so frustrating. You feel like you're just a case file.
Exactly. And it can lead to misdiagnoses or inadequate care because the doctor is so focused on the checklist that they're not seeing the whole picture.
So how do we break free from this checklist mentality?
Well, I think it starts with remembering that healthcare is ultimately about people, not just protocols or procedures.
Right. It's about human beings connecting with other human beings.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that every patient is unique with their own story, their own set of circumstances, their own way of experiencing illness and pain.
So we need to treat each person as an individual.
Absolutely. And that means taking the time to really listen to their story, to understand their fears and anxieties, to address the social and emotional factors that impact their health.
It sounds like a tall order.
It is, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
I bet. And you know what? This reminds me of something Gabriel de Almeida said in his video about dentistry.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
He was talking about how this striving for perfection in dentistry can actually create more anxiety for both the dentist and the patient.
That's interesting.
It's like we're so focused on getting those teeth perfectly straight or that filling perfectly smooth that we forget about the human being in the chair.
We lose sight of the bigger picture.
Exactly. And I think that's true for healthcare in general. We
Yeah.
can get so caught up in the technical aspects that we forget that we're dealing with people who have feelings and fears and vulnerabilities.
We need to find a way to balance the science with the art of care.
The head with the heart.
Yes.
And that brings us back to Roble's idea of kairos versus chronos.
Ah, yes. The quality time versus just the chronological time.
Exactly. And I think that's something we've lost sight of in healthcare.
We're so rushed, so focused on efficiency that we don't take the time to really connect with our patients.
We're just trying to get them in and out as quickly as possible.
But Robles is arguing that we need to slow down to prioritize quality time with our patients.
To really listen to their stories.
Exactly. And to understand their individual needs and values.
It's about being present.
Yes. And that's what the slow medicine movement is all about.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. Tell me more.
Well, it's basically a pushback against this rushed assembly line feel that healthcare can sometimes have.
I like that.
It's about prioritizing quality over quantity.
And relationship over results.
Exactly. It's about seeing the patient as a whole person, not just a collection of symptoms.
So it's kind of a radical idea in today's healthcare landscape.
It is, but it's also an idea whose time has come, I think.
I agree. And it all comes back to this core belief that connection and kindness are essential for healing.
Absolutely. In fact, Robles observes that patients often crave connection and kindness even more than technical expertise.
Really? Is that something you found to be true in your own practice?
Oh, absolutely. I can't tell you how many times patients have told me that what they really appreciate is that I listen to them,
Yeah.
that I take the time to answer their questions,
Yeah.
that I don't make them feel rushed or dismissed.
It's about feeling seen and heard.
Exactly. And that's where emotional intelligence becomes so important for healthcare providers.
So it's not enough to just be a brilliant surgeon or diagnostician.
Right. You also have to be able to connect with people on a human level.
Do you empathize with them to understand their perspective?
Exactly. It's about cultivating those soft skills that are often overlooked in medical training.
So we've got this dance of care, this power dynamic, this need for slowness and connection. It feels like there's a lot to unpack here.
We've only just scratched the surface.
I know. But we're just getting started. We'll be back soon to dive even deeper into these ideas and see what other gems we can uncover.
So much to think about, right? Like, where do we even begin to shift this whole system toward a more human-centered approach?
Well, Robles talks a lot about this idea of the tenko and the soseis.
The have-tos and the only ifs.
Exactly. These kind of unspoken rules and expectations that can make it really hard to break free from the status quo.
Like those invisible barriers.
Yeah, and those barriers can exist for both patients and providers.
So it's not just about patients feeling powerless or unheard.
Right. It's also about healthcare providers feeling constrained by these rigid systems and protocols.
Like they don't have the freedom to really practice medicine the way they want to.
Exactly. And Robles even argues that this kind of checklist mentality can actually be harmful to patients.
How so?
Well, when you're just focused on checking off boxes, you can miss the bigger picture.
You lose sight of the individual person.
Exactly. And everyone's experience of illness and pain is unique. So trying to fit everyone into the same neat little box just doesn't work.
It doesn't, and it can lead to misdiagnosis or inadequate care.
Because you're not really seeing the whole person.
Right. And that's where I think Robles's concept of biopolitics is so important.
Remind me again what that means.
Well, it's basically about how societal structures and power dynamics influence our understanding of health and illness.
So it's not just about individual biases or prejudices.
Right. It's about these larger systems that shape our perceptions and our
And
experiences.
those systems can be really hard to see, let alone change.
They are, but I think the first step is just becoming aware of them.
Recognizing that those power dynamics exist.
Exactly. And then we can start to challenge them.
To push back against those unspoken rules and expectations.
Yes. And to create a more equitable and just healthcare system.
A system that truly values the individual.
Absolutely. And that starts with recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every human being,
And their right to receive compassionate and respectful care.
regardless of their background, their beliefs, their diagnosis.
It's about seeing each person as a whole human being, not just a collection of symptoms.
Exactly. And that requires a shift in mindset both for healthcare providers and for patients.
So how do we start to make that shift?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to cultivate self-awareness.
To become aware of our own biases and assumptions.
Yes. And to be willing to question those
To
assumptions.
challenge the status quo.
Exactly. And to be open to new ways of seeing and understanding the world.
And the people in it.
Absolutely. And I think another key piece is to develop our emotional intelligence.
Our ability to empathize with others.
Yes. And to understand their perspective.
To really listen to their stories.
Exactly. And to respond with compassion and understanding.
And that takes practice.
It does.
Yeah.
But it's a skill that we can all develop.
And it's a skill that's essential for creating a more humane and compassionate healthcare system.
Absolutely. It's about remembering that we're all in this together.
That we're all human beings with our own unique stories and experiences.
And that we all deserve to be treated with dignity and respect.
So how do we start to put these ideas into practice? How do we move beyond just talking about them?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to create space for dialogue.
To have open and honest conversations about the challenges we face in healthcare.
Yes. And to involve all stakeholders in those conversations.
Patients, providers, policymakers, everyone.
Exactly. Because we all have a role to play in creating a better system.
And we need to be willing to challenge each other.
To push each other, to think differently, to do better.
To create a system that truly serves the needs of all people.
And a system that honors the sacredness of the healing relationship.
It's a big vision, but I think it's one worth striving for.
I agree. It's about creating a healthcare system that's worthy of our humanity.
A system that reflects our deepest values of compassion, connection, and care. It's really amazing how these ideas from Robles, from your experience, all tie together.
It's like a tapestry.
Yeah, with all these threads weaving together
Yeah.
to create this bigger picture of what human-centered healthcare could look like.
Exactly. And, one of the things that really struck me from Robles' work is this idea that science by itself can be violent.
Wow. Yeah, that's a strong statement.
It is, but I think there's a lot of truth to it.
In what way?
Well, I think when we focus too much on the technical aspects of healthcare, on the science, we can lose sight of the human element.
The art of care.
Exactly. And that can lead to a kind of dehumanization of the patient.
You know, it's like that saying, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yes. And if our only tool is a scalpel or a prescription pad, then we might miss the nuances of the person's experience.
We might miss the emotional and spiritual dimensions of healing.
Right. And that's why Robles emphasizes the importance of the Axis 2 evaluation in chronic pain management.
Axis 2, what's that?
Well, it's basically a way of assessing the psychological and social factors that contribute to a person's experience of pain.
So it's not just about the physical symptoms.
Right. It's about understanding the whole person, their history, their relationships, their beliefs, their coping mechanisms.
Because all of those things can impact how they experience and manage their pain.
Exactly. And Robles argues that this kind of holistic assessment is essential for providing effective care.
So it's not enough to just treat the physical symptoms.
No. We have to address the underlying emotional and social factors as well.
And that might involve therapies that go beyond traditional medicine.
Exactly. Things like cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, meditation, acupuncture.
All those things that we talked about earlier.
Right. Because healing is a multidimensional process. It's not just about fixing the body. It's about nurturing the whole person.
Body, mind, and spirit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why I think Robles' work is so important. He's reminding us of the humanity of healthcare.
Of the importance of connection and compassion.
Of the need to slow down, to listen, to really see the person in front of us.
And to remember that we're all in this together.
We are, as caregivers and as care receivers.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I want them to remember that they have a voice. They have the right to advocate for their own health and well-being.
To ask questions. To seek out providers who align with their values.
Exactly. And to never give up hope.
Beautiful. And I want to add that caring for ourselves is just as important as caring for others.
Absolutely. We can't pour from an empty cup.
Right. We need to nurture our own well-being so that we can show up fully for the people in our lives.
And that includes seeking support when we need it.
Yes. There's no shame in asking for help, whether it's from a therapist, a friend, a family member, or a healthcare provider.
We're all in this together, remember?
We are. So let's keep the conversation going. Let's keep exploring these ideas, and let's keep striving to create a more humane and compassionate world.
A world where everyone feels seen, heard, and cared for.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh.
This has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights with us.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of healthcare.
We hope it's inspired you to think differently about what it means to care and to be cared for.
And to remember that even in the midst of all the challenges, there's always hope. There's always the possibility of connection, and there's always the power of human love.
Beautifully said.
Until next time, keep diving deep.